Link, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
Right.
I will have the
Oh,
link. I'll put it up.
we're
okay,
live.
okay, okay. Now we good. We good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right.
Hallelujah.
Anna, your video went out.
What? Oh my.
It's all
Can
right.
you
We've
guys
got,
still hear me?
yes,
Yes.
thankfully we can still hear you.
Okay. I
So
think
it's
that's
fine.
more important. Yeah.
Okay, so this week it says for us to discuss how the concepts of racism, ethnicity, and culture are embedded in the Department of Education for the State of Hawaii Strategic Plan. So do you want to just take this question kind of one at a time, or one part at a time?
Can I
Yeah, sure.
can, can I go first in case my thingamabob decides to go off on me again?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think my answer is on page 5 of the strategic plan. And that page 5 lists the core values, but these are some of the few notes that I took down on how I see the strategic plan addressing these issues. And one of them said to cultivate, advance, and draw from Hawaii's rich traditions and native Hawaiian host culture. And then there was another one under meaningful learning, and I highlighted how they said success in a culturally diverse, technologically complex, and independent global society. So, from those two main points from page 5, I think that the Hawaii Strategic Plan acknowledges all the different cultures in Hawaii, but also doesn't ignore the host culture, which is the Hawaiian culture. So, I think that is very um, that's one of the good things about the strategic plan. I don't remember our strategic plan in American Samoa. I don't think we even have one that we all apply to. But that's how I think Hawaii's SP is addressing these issues. They embrace every culture, but they don't ignore the hosting culture. So
Those were the
that's
same 2 points that I picked out as well. Exactly the same two that I touched upon, and just how you said it exactly, that they're acknowledging and embracing the diverse cultures that surround us every day, and not forgetting how you said the host Hawaiian culture there. I feel like obviously here in Hawaii they're going to put more importance on that host culture, and I think that's a
mhm,
good thing. It's only fair, as in any other place in the world they're going to be the most um, maybe not promote their culture, but they're going to be the most active in that certain
mhm,
culture. But still, it's, as you said, they're embracing and not ignoring all the
mhm,
rest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the things I came up with this week also came out of those core values. I mean, there's so much, as you guys said, about, encouraging culturally diverse learning and, making sure that all cultures are, mutually respected in the strategic plan. One thing that I also kind of recollected when I was looking at this too was in the core values when they said in part in number 4, the connection to community, family, and Aina, where they say seeing students as part of the environment, the larger community, the global society, and valuing these connections to make the world a better place. I mean, if you go back to chapter 1 of the textbook that we were reading, it's really interesting when they said, multiculturalism is about different cultures and values and ethnicities, but it's also about a respect for the earth, and so this 4th core value, I think, really connects back to that idea that I think we often don't attach with this idea of multiculturalism, where you're setting out a goal to really make students stewards to help make the world a better place. And I thought, I mean, it's not racism, ethnicity, but it's culture, and I think that's a really important point that I noted.
Hmm.
mhm,
And that's definitely a huge part of Hawaiian culture, is the land and valuing it and taking care of it.
Yeah,
That's very, very strong value.
yeah.
Jane, What are some things you pulled?
There is, because I most like to see some examples because I think it's more solid to have the picture in my mind. And one example shared in this article is that in many Hawaii homes, it is unusual for an individual to command the attention of the entire group, as social relationships tend to be more collaborative in nature. In keeping with this cultural tradition, many Hawaiians engage in talk story. Talk story involves several people telling a story together. Similarly, teachers can use parallel strategies in their classrooms to facilitate dialogue and student participation. When teachers are unaware of student cultural attributes, the possibility of culture in the classroom expands potentially. What do you guys think this example?
Sorry, where did you read that, Jane?
I'm having a really hard time hearing you. It's like there's a lot of commotion going on
Yeah.
somewhere. Or
Let me
like
try. Yeah.
rustling or something's moving around. I don't know if it's your computer, Jane, or one of the others. I don't know.
I don't know either. Let me try to.
Definitely not mine. I'm trying not to move this phone in case it might go off.
Anyway, I just want to know more about like you have some students from different culture. How is there any example to collaborate all different countries' children engage one activity?
Are you asking about how to get different, like culturally diverse students to engage in one cultural activity?
Not necessarily one culture activity, because this topic I feel difficult because I work with preschool children. I really don't see any difficulty with their communication. I think most issue come to teenagers, I think. So I don't really have any experience with that. So yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Jane, what were you referring to in what you just, the quote you just read? Is that, what is that from?
Oh no, I think this is I read some article from different website. Yeah.
Okay. But okay, could you hold on to your question about the examples, and then once we talk about the things in the Hangout question, we'll cover those first and then go to that, because it's kind of different.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the example saying that in many Hawaiian homes, it is unusual for an individual to command the attention of the entire group, as social relationships tend to be more collaborative in nature. In keeping with this cultural tradition, many Hawaiians engage in talk story. Talk story involves several people telling a story together. Similarly, teachers can use parallel strategies in their classrooms to facilitate dialogue and student participation. When teachers are unaware of students' cultural attributes, the possibility of cultural ism in the classroom expand. Let me try to find this word.
So I think, Jane, I think what you're talking about is how teachers kind of like bring in different ways of, culturally, teaching cultural backgrounds in the classroom. I think if we're going to relate that back to the strategic plan that we were reading, I think that like that's a really good example of how teachers in Hawaii might be like integrating their cultural background into the classrooms. I'm not sure if I'm making the right connection, and correct me if I'm wrong. But like in the strategic plan, they talk about this kind of idea. I think it was in the GLOs, the general, what are they called?
General learners outcomes.
Oh, right, general learners outcomes, where they talk about how there needs to be a diversity in the teaching methods in the classroom. And like from that, a diversity of understanding and culture. I forget exactly. I'm trying to find it now. I think that's kind of a good example of what teachers might be doing in order to fulfill that.
I think Jane's question and trying to answer her question leads to answering the second portion of the Hangout question, which is what are some of the strategies that teachers can employ to address these topics with their classrooms. I think Jane was trying to address, like, it's difficult for Hawaiian students to command attention or something like that, and then they turn to storytelling or something like that. And how that can be incorporated in the classrooms, in Hawaiian classroom, because storytelling, I think, I don't know if you all know, but is one of the important aspects of the Hawaiian culture or any Polynesian culture.
Right.
And I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to end by saying I think Jane's point is great. She wanted to incorporate storytelling. That's one way to employ multiculturalism into our classrooms here in Hawaii in relation to the strategic Hawaiian plan.
In the article, she had talked about the talking story, and a lot of the times it's not even necessarily a story itself, like 700 years ago, yada yada yada. It's more, talking story is like a casual way of saying that we all just sat down and shared all kinds of stuff. We talked about this and that, and it's a really local term, I've learned. Like, I said it in the mainland once to one of my roommates. I said, I went to my friend's house, we just hung out and talked story. Like, it's just, we just had casual talks, and it's just I think, I'm almost positive it's just a local phrase, and there's no specific subject it has to be about, or it doesn't even have to be cultural stories, but I think they're trying to say that by incorporating that kind of talk story vibe in your class, the students would, they know it's more casual. It's not like they're giving a presentation or a speech where they have to be nervous, or there's not the nerves that come with it, because they're just kind of, sitting with 3 or 4 friends and just casually sharing as if they were at recess. And I think for all ages that would be a really good way to incorporate it, because I'm sure little kids to high schoolers to college kids get nervous when they have the pressure. But if it's something more casual, then it would take the pressure off, and it would be easier for them to share, I think.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, Kelly, because when we were doing the reflection, I was thinking about this. She asked about how, creating these lists of academic abilities and special abilities. And when I was thinking of the list of academic abilities, I felt so limited in what I had to write down. Whereas when I thought of special abilities, I really thought more about, the things that kind of my culture and my experiences traveling in other cultures has taught me. And I think that's one of the great things when you kind of integrate culture, like, in Hawaii, you're introducing this talk story. I think it's kind of like a more comfortable way to teach subjects and to like engage students in the classroom. Whereas when I thought of academic abilities, I really thought of like, doing math problems or, writing out hypotheses for science or something. And even just thinking about that made me feel a little bit more stressed because it's just so, it's so like limited in where you can take it, and everybody has to kind of study and do the same thing.
And maybe that's because the academic abilities, you feel like your abilities are only shown with the results of grades. It's a concrete letter that tells you if this is your ability or not, kind of thing. Whereas a special ability, there's no grade for if you're a good storyteller or you tell good jokes. You don't get an A for it or you don't get an F. So I think that word comfortable, it's in a wider range, I feel. Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it.
So are we on the second portion of the question?
Yeah, and I also noticed in the article, it did mention, it really emphasizes on Hawaii's culture and the community as well. A lot about the community and the parent involvement and all of that. And I noticed that it didn't explicitly really mention race or racism or ethnicities too much. And so I kind of had a hard time with the question when it was asking for those things, but I realized just in the position that it was written, they weren't writing it as if they feel oppressed or as if they feel like they're the victim. They were writing it and they're proud of Hawaii's rank as this, or Hawaii, we have our graduation rate is that. They were speaking of their accomplishments proudly rather than trying to kind of, like I said, play the victim or like poor us, whatever it could have been. And I appreciated that in reading it. It didn't make you feel, like, oh, I'm from Hawaii and this is what we are when it comes down to paper. But it really emphasized on building and strengthening the kids who are going to be later the adults and in the working force. And so even though it didn't specifically talk about that, I really like the position it was written from, I guess I could say.
I thought the strategic plan itself was very positive. Like the core values really emphasize these ideas of, interconnections between students, teachers, and families. And building kind of a pluralistic classroom. And so much of that is what we've been reading in the textbook. But that being said, it was difficult for me to pull out specifically to say, okay, this really relates to issues of race or this relates to ethnicity, culture. Most of what I read kind of gave me the feeling that they were really talking more about like income levels for families, like making sure that, if you're wealthy or poor, that you're able to get the same education, things like that. And so that did make this a little bit difficult for me. But I really liked the emphasis that the strategic plan put on families. I thought that was so positive. And I think that's such an important part of like integrating culture into the classroom is making sure that families, just because you send your kids there doesn't mean that you as a parent should be ignored, right? In the objectives, I think it was in 1C where they talked about how families need to be engaged in a meaningful, culturally respectful way to support the success of the student. I think that's so integral to good education is to make sure that the family's involved, that we as educators understand their background, their culture, what they're going through, and how that will affect their child in the classroom. And I really liked that.
I also like how they put emphasis on the community as well. I think that's one way a teacher can employ multiculturalism topics into the classroom. If they would take some time to identify community assets that can help the students and the families of their classrooms access them. And this is especially useful for those who belong in the minority. But more often than not, I think teachers can find great cultural, religious, and educational and youth development organizations near their schools that are eagerly looking for ways to connect with their work with the students. And I think if you connect the community and the families and the school together, um, it can break down barriers, dispel stereotypes, and provide opportunities for students to celebrate all the good things that grow out of the community they belong to. And as a result, I think it will benefit the students' learning.
Yeah,
And I really like
I really agree with that.
the last line, the closing line, and it just said by focusing, it was their concluding statement, but by focusing on these clear, consistent targets, staying the course, and continuing to strive together, we'll arrive at our common destination, which is student success, staff success, and system success, because the students are who are in the classroom, and that's who everything is based on, pretty much, is the success of the students, and culture is what's a part of them. That's who they are. So it's definitely not something that can be ignored or just not mentioned in the classrooms, even though it's not something that's academic or you can't give a grade to culture. But
Yeah.
I just think the stronger you can build that, and I don't know, I mean, as someone who grew up here, I just feel like once you have like you can identify with the culture, it just makes you, I think, feel more proud to be a part of it, or to be included in something,
Yeah.
and to have
Yeah, I
like,
definitely think that's true.
and I don't know if the word is not to say to feel important. I mean, but you feel a part of something,
And not left out.
definitely. What was that?
And not feeling left out.
Yeah, yeah.
Sense of
And
belonging.
It's interesting too, because I think that kind of goes to like what we read about in chapter 4. Like there's something really interesting I read in chapter 4, where they were saying like the second, the first generation of immigrants, they all just were so quickly assimilated into American culture, and they became proud to be Americans, and everything was kind of like, white bread, just everything the same. And the second generation of immigrants, now I'm not saying like people in Hawaii are immigrants, I'll relate it back, but I mean the second generation of immigrants are these people who, they come in and they are Americans, but they're also, their own culture. They're also Mexican Americans or, Caribbean Americans. And I think it's so important now, I mean, for schools to really think progressively about, you're not just American, and we're not just, people who study science and math. I mean, we're, you're Hawaiians, or you're, Southerners, or whatever you want to, or Caribbeans, or Mexicans, whatever you want to call yourself. And really allowing students, the chance to kind of be proud of that you're not just one person in another country, like you have a culture and you're contributing that culture to the world. And I think that really made this strategic plan very progressive. It's really looking at education as it is today,
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I think for addressing the issues of race and culture, I found out in the chapter 4, maybe chapter 4, they said that not only are non-white ethnic groups in United States society affected by racism, many white immigrants, such as the Irish, Italians, and the Jews from Eastern Europe. And I read there are many different issues, and I feel really anxious after read those stories, and I feel like this they are living in another world. It's kind of scary to me. And also in the chapter 3 and 4, there are just some strategies to how to solve these issues. Like teachers can use interracial teams and peer coaching to develop technical skills in physical class, and teachers can also use partner learning and cooperative learning teams to teach concepts within a classroom climate of acceptance in the mathematics classroom and the science classroom. So, what do you guys think?
I mean, I think those strategies that you just listed that they talked about in the book, partner learning, I think those are good strategies.
And just encouraging students to maybe a little bit break out of the comfort zone. I remember your students who you said were the Japanese boys, and every day they kind of just stuck together. And maybe just talking to them and not explicitly saying don't hang out with them or go hang out with someone in a different culture, but just pushing them as a class, maybe once a week go sit next to someone else at lunch, or go, partner with somebody else that you haven't partnered with before. Just trying to mix up the comfort, the group, or the partners that they're used to just kind of being a magnet to and sticking to because they're comfortable. So yeah, mixing up of the groups. And I always hated that for school just because I couldn't be with my friends, not anything to do with cultural or racial differences. It was just you'd always want to be with your friends because that's who you're comfortable with. But I think if you do it at a young age like preschool, then even kindergarten, any age, the younger they can start doing that, I would think the better for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the older the students get, the more curious they are, and I think that's why Jane doesn't really have experience with the. I think she mentioned in the beginning of our hangout today that she doesn't have much experience with the preschool kids on questioning multicultural issues. But I think the older you get, the more you know, and the more curious you become as well. So, not that I'm saying I have experience teaching teens, but that's what I have observed growing up. Yep. Have we addressed everything, or do we still have something we didn't tackle?
I think that was the last one.
That was the last one?
The strategy is right.
I think to sum it up for me, the three main strategies that I think is important has nothing to do with being in the classroom, but it has to do with the teacher. And I think the first thing is to get educated on the topics and their students. The second is to not be biased. And then, oh my gosh, I think Charlene just left the call. And then the third is to seek out established community organizations to help, for futures and stuff like that. But yeah, those are the three important ones.
There is one idea I would like to share is that it's not in chapter 3 or 4, it's in chapter 2, I think. It addresses one way to develop cultural consciousness is to see how someone from another culture perceives or misperceives us. What do you guys think this suggestion?
How someone from another culture perceives
Us or misperceives us?
If
us
you
as
think
Americans.
that other people's perceptions, they're saying, has an effect on your education or on your, what are they saying that it affects?
Let me find out.
Us as Americans or us like individually?
It's on the page 42. I think maybe like I asked you guys because your background is Hawaii. So how you guys think Chinese culture and how I think Hawaii culture, and then we may consciously realize, oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
This is my understanding from this.
And that just kind of goes back to like generalizations, right? Is kind of what you're getting at, that are just preconceived, and not necessarily they're bad things, just generalizations for the most part, like, oh, all Hawaii people do this or whatever it is, and like you said, vice versa, whatever our kind of initial thought of Chinese people and Chinese culture, and it's a very good possibility that those are very different than what it actually is.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it will be really, really fun activity and communication, and why you act like that? Because you think like that. It will be really fun, I think.
Okay, this is off the subject, but did Charlene just drop out of the Hangout?
I think so.
Yeah, she did when I last spoke. I think she's trying to message us, but I'm afraid to go view the messages because if I do, I can't come back. I tried that.
Oh, okay.
Unless somebody can.
I tried to chat her, and I just asked Charlene, and I put the question marks, but she's not responding. So I think maybe her computer might have died, because there's not the green dot next to her name that says that she's online, you know? So maybe her computer just kind of shut down. But she's the one that is able to get to the link.
Oh.
So I don't know if we just have to keep this running until she gets back, or I really don't know.
This is just not our day.
So you think even we copy the links, it doesn't work, right?
No,
but do we have access
she's the
to
only
the
one that can. Yeah, she's the only one, since she's the one who's. It was weird because it said Anna started the call, so I don't know how Charlie then got. Whoever has the button to say go live, that's the person who has the link.
Yeah, I started a call and it still says live. But
Charlie's the only one who can kind of stop the chat and get the link. This is so confusing.
It is. Wow. That's not good. Because if her computer shut down, then and she was the one recording, then it means that we might have to do this all over again.